Let's get to it. 12. Beers Nimrod. In 1842, an ambitious British diplomat named Austen Henry Layard began digging into the dusty, sun-baked mounds of Mesopotamia. He wasn't looking for mythological relics. He was hunting for the lost empire of Assyria. But beneath the shifting sands of modern-day Iraq, he found something that shattered his Victorian understanding of the ancient world. He uncovered a towering ruin of baked brick, struck by a force so unfathomably violent that it defied all known laws of natural weather. It was the legendary Tower of Babel. Today, we call it Beers Nimrod, a massive ziggurat that once scraped the skies of Babylon. But it's not the sheer scale of the ruins that keeps structural engineers awake at night. It's the summit. The entire top of this colossal ancient skyscraper isn't just broken or collapsed, it is vitrified. The ancient Mesopotamian bricks have been completely fused together into a solid, impenetrable mass of black slag. Here is the thermodynamics problem. To melt this specific type of clay brick into liquid glass requires sustained temperatures exceeding 1200 degrees Celsius, roughly 2200 degrees Fahrenheit. Mainstream archaeologists shrug and blame a severe thunderstorm. But atmospheric physicists will quickly point out that a lightning strike, while incredibly hot, only lasts for a fraction of a millisecond. It simply does not have the sustained duration required to melt an entire building into a puddle of glass. You need an open-air kiln. You need a sustained thermal shock. The conventional explanation insists on anomalous freak weather patterns, concentrating repeated lightning strikes on one single spot for hours. But the sheer volume of vitrified mass suggests something far more terrifying, a directed plasma discharge or an ancient weapon of mass destruction. And if you think a melted ziggurat in the Iraqi desert is a strange geographical anomaly, wait until we travel to the freezing granite highlands of Scotland. 11. Craig Fedric. Imagine you are an ancient Celtic chieftain preparing for a brutal siege. You command your warriors to build an impenetrable fortress high on a Scottish hill. You drag massive slabs of granite to form defensive walls 10 feet thick. It is a monument to brute strength and tribal engineering, designed to withstand the fiercest battering rams. Yet, centuries later, when explorers finally rediscover your mighty fortress, they find that your legendary walls haven't been smashed, they've been turned to melted wax. Welcome to Craig Fedric, one of over 60 so-called vitrified forts scattered across Scotland. The granite walls here are completely fused together in a glossy vitrified matrix. Mainstream historians confidently declare that Celtic defenders, or their attackers, deliberately set logs afire against the walls. They claim it was a tactic to either destroy the fort or magically strengthen it. But this is a blatant insult to the laws of thermodynamics. As we established, an open-air wood fire maxes out around 800 degrees Celsius. Granite requires a minimum of 1200 degrees to reach vaporization and melting points. You cannot melt solid granite with a pile of dry twigs at a stiff Scottish breeze. To achieve this level of vitrification, you need the sustained heat of a modern industrial blast furnace, completely trapping the thermal energy. An open-air campfire simply disperses the heat into the atmosphere. The math doesn't lie, and the physics forbids it. Skeptics argue that high winds could act as natural bellows, artificially raising the temperature of a massive timber fire. But even under perfect storm conditions, you cannot bridge a 400-degree thermal deficit in the open air. This wasn't a campfire, this was a high-yield thermal event. And this kind of inexplicable localized melting isn't just limited to defensive walls. Sometimes it wipes out entire civilizations in the blink of an eye. Tal El Hamam. Around 3,600 years ago, a thriving, bustling metropolis stood proudly in the lush Jordan Valley. It was a crown jewel of the Middle Bronze Age, dwarfing Jerusalem in both size and political power. People were trading, cooking, and sleeping in their mud brick homes. And then, in a fraction of a second, the sky tore open. The entire city, along with every man, woman, and child inside it, ceased to exist. They were not invaded, they were instantly vaporized. The archaeological site of Tal El Hamam is a crime scene of biblical proportions. When scientists dug into the ruins, they didn't just find collapsed buildings, they found a 5-foot-thick destruction layer filled with melted pottery, bubbled mud bricks, and completely carbonized human remains. Most shockingly, they discovered shocked quartz, a microscopic deformity in sand grains that requires pressures of millions of pounds per square inch. This kind of directional, instantaneous melting and pressure anomaly is completely impossible to achieve with ancient technology. In modern times, you only see shocked quartz and bubbled mud brick at the detonation zero points of nuclear airbursts or direct cosmic impacts. The sheer kinetic and thermal energy required to melt a city into liquid glass in under a second is staggering. Temperatures at Tal El Hamam spiked past 2,000 degrees Celsius, instantly boiling the moisture inside the stone until it popped like grotesque popcorn. Mainstream science actually agrees here, concluding that a massive meteor airburst, similar to the Tunguska event, wiped Tal El Hamam off the map, potentially inspiring the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah. But while a random meteor explains this specific Jordanian apocalypse, it fails to explain why identical thermal signatures are found carefully scattered in the dead center of streets halfway across the Asian continent. The glass nodules of Mohenjo-Daro. In 1922, an officer of the Archaeological Survey of India stumbled upon a mound of the dead. He unearthed an impossibly advanced grid-plan city featuring indoor plumbing and a sophisticated sewage system that rivaled modern metropolises. It was the heart of the ancient Indus Valley civilization. But as he walked through the perfectly aligned, silent streets, he realized the city hadn't slowly declined. It had been suddenly, violently exterminated by a flash heat event that left behind a haunting, glassy residue. The city is Mohenjo-Daro, and at its very epicenter, explorers discovered something chilling: perfectly preserved black glass nodules scattered across the ancient pavement. Laboratory analysis revealed a terrifying truth. These were not natural volcanic glass like obsidian. These were ordinary clay pots and building bricks that had been subjected to a flash heat event so intense they vaporized and fused into glass instantly. To transform terrestrial clay into liquid black glass requires a thermal shock of at least 1,500 degrees Celsius. Furthermore, British researcher David Davenport claimed to have found a 50-yard radius within the city where everything was crystallized, fused, and melted. Even the stones themselves were vitrified, yet there is no evidence of a volcanic eruption within hundreds of miles. To achieve this hyper-localized vaporization, you would need an instantaneous plasma burst. You cannot get this from an accidental kitchen fire. Skeptics try to brush this off as the remnants of extremely localized primitive kilns that somehow exploded, but an exploding ancient pottery kiln doesn't reach the vaporization point of solid stone. The evidence points to a massive, instantaneous release of energy right in the city square. And this strange application of extreme heat to stone isn't just an Asian phenomenon, it's carved into the highest peaks of the Andes. 8. The glazed walls of Sexayhuaman. High in the Andes, overlooking the imperial city of Cuzco, sits a megalithic marvel that defies all logic. The Spanish conquistadors, upon seeing it for the first time, were so terrified by its impossible scale that they claimed it was the work of demons. It is a fortress constructed of colossal, irregular stone blocks, some weighing upwards of 100 tons, all fitted together with a precision so terrifyingly perfect that you cannot slide a single sheet of paper between them. The site is Sexayhuaman, and while everyone rightly obsesses over the sheer weight of these interlocking Andesite megaliths, they are completely ignoring the most crucial piece of the puzzle: the surface of the stones themselves. If you look closely at certain sections of this ancient wall, the andesite isn't roughly chiseled. It has a glossy, vitrified glaze. It looks exactly as if the exterior was hit with a massive industrial blowtorch. Andesite is an incredibly hard igneous rock. You cannot polish it to a glass-like glaze using copper chisels and river sand. The surface exhibits clear signs of thermal alteration. It is as if extreme concentrated heat was used to literally soften the outer layer of the stone, allowing the builders to mold them together like putty before they cooled and hardened. This completely bypasses the need for cutting tools. They weren't carving the stone, they were melting it. Traditional geologists will desperately claim this glassy sheen is just natural chemical weathering or the result of centuries of seismic friction. But friction doesn't produce an even high-temperature glaze across selectively shaped blocks. This implies a highly advanced thermal terraforming technology. And if you think a blowtorch in Peru was wild, wait until you see the sheer mountainous volume of melted rock waiting for us back in the United Kingdom. 7. Tap Enough. Let's return to the freezing, windswept peaks of Scotland. You are standing at the second highest hill fort in the entire country, staring at a massive rectangular enclosure. But as you run your hands along the monumental walls, your fingers don't meet rough, ancient masonry. They glide over a smooth, bubbling surface of black, porous glass. You are looking at an entire mountain summit that has been baked in a hellish, inexplicable inferno. This is Tap Enough, and the sheer volume of melted rock here is absolutely staggering. Unlike other forts where you might find a stray melted rock or two, the ramparts here are heavily vitrified in massive, continuous stretches. We're talking about thousands of tons of stone fused together. Mainstream historians claim the ancient Celtic builders deliberately melted their own fort by dragging tons of timber up a mountain to bake the walls, insisting it was a technique to strengthen the stone. But heating stone actually causes structural microfractures, weakening it immensely. Alternative theorists, pointing to the thermodynamic impossibility of an open-air wood fire melting a mountain, say these forts were blasted from the sky by directed energy or ancient plasma weapons. Ask yourself, which tribe makes more sense to you? The historians who ignore the physics of fire, or the theorists pointing to unknown high-tech warfare? Drop your tribe in the comments right now. The deliberate firing theory requires us to believe our ancestors were both architectural geniuses and thermodynamic idiots who thought crumbling heat-fractured rock was a good defense. The plasma discharge theory sounds like science fiction, yet perfectly aligns with the physical evidence of instantaneous, superheated melting. And this mysterious glazing technique isn't just used for destruction, sometimes it is used to engineer perfect sound. Number 6. The Barabar Caves. Deep in the Jehanabad district of India sits a massive, solid granite boulder shaped like a submarine. For thousands of years, ascetics and monks have vanished into its dark interior to meditate. But they didn't go in there for the silence, they went in for the sound. When you step inside this ancient man-made cavern and speak a single word, the echo doesn't just bounce, it sustains, reverberates, and wraps around you for an impossible several seconds, creating a sensory experience that feels distinctly supernatural. These are the Barabar Caves, the oldest surviving rock-cut caves in India. The acoustic perfection of these chambers is undeniably mind-blowing, but the real mystery is how they achieved it. The interior walls of this solid granite mountain are polished to a literal mirror finish. You can see your own reflection in stone that was supposedly carved over 2,000 years ago. But independent engineers and material scientists who have examined the walls argue this isn't a manual polish, it's a glaze. The surface under a microscope doesn't show the microscopic striations of abrasive rubbing. It shows the smooth, melted structure of a thermal application. It looks like an ancient builder flashed the interior of the granite with an intense, uniform heat source, melting the outer millimeters of the rock into a smooth, glassy shell. This thermal glazing locked in the perfect acoustic resonance, bouncing sound waves off a surface smoother than modern glass. Academics insist this mirror finish was achieved by generations of monks patiently rubbing the granite with animal skins and wet sand. But rubbing sand on granite doesn't alter its chemical structure into a vitrified glaze. The walls were subjected to a highly controlled high-temperature thermal wash. And this mastery of extreme heat isn't just found in Indian caves, it echoes through the scorching deserts of the American West. Number 5. The melted city of Death Valley. In the mid-19th century, during the chaotic rush of westward expansion, a group of weary explorers and prospectors stumbled through the most inhospitable terrain on the North American continent, Death Valley. Dehydrated and hallucinating from the heat, they claimed to have found something impossible hidden among the shifting dunes. It wasn't gold. It was the sprawling, ancient ruin of a massive citadel, and the stones of this citadel weren't just ruined, they were completely fused together by an unearthly fire. According to the reports published by these early explorers, they discovered a ruined city where the surviving stone blocks had been heavily vitrified. The building materials were welded together in a solid melted mass, looking as though the entire settlement had been placed inside a cosmic microwave. What makes this 19th century account so chilling is its direct correlation with local indigenous lore. The native Paiute peoples of the region have long-standing legends speaking of a great city in the valley, a city of immense wealth that was suddenly destroyed when a star fell from the sky. If we apply our thermodynamic principles, a localized cosmic impact or an aerial plasma burst would generate the exact thermal shock required to fuse stone architecture into a melted slag heap. We are looking at a localized heat event surpassing 2,000 degrees Celsius in a desert where the natural maximum temperature barely scratches 56 degrees. Skeptics naturally dismiss the Death Valley Citadel as a campfire tall tale, a mirage brought on by severe dehydration and sunstroke. But the corroboration between the physical description of vitrified stone and the indigenous oral history of a destructive falling star is a remarkably precise coincidence. And speaking of precise thermal destruction, let's look at a legitimate, undisputed capital city that met an identical fiery fate. Number 4. The walls of Hattusa. Picture a superpower of the ancient world, an empire so vast and militarily dominant that even the mighty Egyptian pharaoh Ramses II was forced to sign a peace treaty with them. This was the Hittite Empire. Their capital city was a seemingly impenetrable mountain fortress surrounded by massive cyclopean stone walls. But around 1200 BC, this invincible empire collapsed practically overnight, vanishing into the dustbin of history. When we finally found their capital, we discovered exactly why. Welcome to Hattusa, located in modern-day Turkey. When archaeologists excavated the massive defensive walls of this ancient capital, they found something that completely defied standard Bronze Age warfare. Massive, continuous sections of the limestone foundation had mysteriously turned into solid green glass. Mainstream archaeologists confidently declare this was caused by a very intense city fire during an invasion by the mysterious Sea Peoples. But plasma physicists will gladly tell you that throwing torches at limestone doesn't magically transmute it into solid green glass. Limestone requires sustained thermal blasts exceeding 800 degrees Celsius just to calcine, and much higher temperatures with specific fluxing agents to vitrify. Was it an invading army with primitive torches, or did Hattusa fall victim to ancient high-tech directed energy warfare? I want to see you debate this. Are you team ancient torches or team plasma weaponry? Sound off in the comments. The conventional narrative relies on an impossible combustion scenario, assuming mud, wood, and straw burned hot enough and long enough to melt a city's foundations. The alternative suggests an energy release so devastating it essentially nuked the Hittite capital into submission. And if you think green glass in Turkey is a strange thermal anomaly, wait until you see the boiling granite of the French countryside. Number 3. Camp de Perron. In the lush, rolling hills of Brittany, France, lies a quiet, unassuming archaeological site. To the untrained eye, it looks nothing more than an ancient circular earthwork, an overgrown remnant of a forgotten Celtic tribe. But when geologists decided to take core samples of the massive stone ramparts hiding beneath the grass, they found a thermal signature so violent it practically rewrites the laws of natural fire. The stones here didn't just melt, they boiled. This is Camp de Peron, another massive entry in the global phenomena of vitrification. But Camp de Peron is special. The granite ramparts here were subjected to such extreme, unmitigated heat that the very core of the stones reached boiling point. We aren't just talking about a superficial glassy glaze on the outside. The internal structure of the rock is fully vesicular, meaning it bubbled like boiling water before rapidly cooling. Once again, mainstream academics propose that local tribes piled up timber and set it ablaze. But to boil granite, you need sustained temperatures pushing an astronomical 1,500 degrees Celsius. You cannot create an enclosed kiln effect in the open air on a grassy hill with burning logs. Wood simply lacks the energy density. Physics completely forbids it. The heat energy required to boil thousands of tons of granite requires a thermal output closer to a rocket engine test site than a Bronze Age bonfire. The academic insistence on wood fires is a desperate attempt to fit an impossible anomaly into a comfortable historical timeline. But the boiling granite of France points to an undeniable high-energy cataclysm that we refuse to acknowledge. And if you want to talk about high-energy cataclysms, nothing compares to the terrifying sea of yellow glass hidden deep in the African desert. Number 2. The Trinitite of the Libyan Desert. In 1932, a British engineer was driving across the desolate, trackless expanse of the Great Sand Sea in the Egyptian Libyan Desert. He was hundreds of miles from civilization, surrounded by nothing but endless dunes. But as he crested a ridge, the sun caught something shimmering in the sand. He hadn't found water. He had found a massive, glittering sea of pale yellow-green glass, stretching for dozens of miles across the barren earth. It was beautiful, and it was utterly terrifying. What he discovered is now known as Libyan Desert glass. It spans over 100 miles of destroyed surface area. This isn't a building. It is the remnant of an apocalyptic thermal event. Here is where the physics gets incredibly dark. This pure yellow glass is chemically and physically identical to trinitite, the radioactive glass created by the immense heat of the Trinity atomic bomb test in New Mexico in 1945. When we detonate nuclear weapons in the desert, the flash heat instantly melts the sand into glass. The Libyan glass requires a thermal shock of at least 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit to form. There is no impact crater, ruling out a traditional meteor strike. The only mechanism known to modern science capable of instantly melting 100 miles of desert sand into trinitite-like glass without a crater is a massive, multi-megaton aerial burst. The horrific question is, what kind of bomb went off in the skies over Egypt 26,000 years ago? Geologists argue it was a soft comet that exploded in the atmosphere, showering the desert with intense thermal radiation. But whether it was a rogue comet or an ancient weapon of terrifying power, the Earth was bathed in temperatures mimicking the surface of the sun. Which brings us to a theory so radical, it suggests this wasn't an isolated event, but a global reset. Number 1. The Meltology theory of Petra and Cappadocia. Look at the iconic treasury building in Petra, Jordan. You've seen it in movies, an exquisite temple intricately carved straight into the rose-red cliffside. Now look at the bizarre fairy chimneys of Cappadocia, Turkey, towering phallic pillars of rock with strange melted-looking caps. We have always been told that these are the results of patient chiseling, gentle wind, and millions of years of water erosion. But what if we've been looking at this entirely backwards? What if they weren't carved? What if they were melted? Welcome to the ultimate paradigm shift, the Meltology theory. This theory proposes that the strange flowing rock faces of Petra, the warped caverns of Cappadocia, and hundreds of megalithic sites worldwide are not the products of slow geological weathering. Instead, they are the actual physical remnants of hyper-advanced pre-flood architecture, ancient skyscrapers and megacities that were partially melted during a devastating global solar plasma event around 12,000 years ago. Meltologists argue that the smooth, drippy, and fluid-like appearances of these massive rock structures bear the exact physical hallmarks of X-class solar flares or coronal mass ejections striking the Earth. If a massive plasma arc touched down, it would instantly superheat existing stone structures, causing them to bubble, warp, and sag like melting wax candles before instantly flash cooling back into solid rock. When you look at Petra through the lens of thermodynamics, the facade doesn't look carved, it looks like it survived a blast furnace. Mainstream geology laughs at meltology, fiercely defending the incredibly slow processes of wind and water erosion to explain these bizarre fluid rock formations. But the meltology theory forces us to confront a terrifying possibility. We aren't the first advanced civilization to walk this planet. We are simply the survivors living in the melted, vitrified ashes of the last one. Are we looking at the natural wrath of the cosmos or the suppressed evidence of ancient high-tech warfare? The truth is hiding in plain sight, baked into the very stones we walk on. If this video made you question the official timeline of human history, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We don't just scratch the surface here on Oddly Explained. We dig until we hit the truth. Drop a comment with which theory blew your mind the most. Share this with someone who needs to wake up. And until next time, keep questioning everything.